Nigeria's government has indefinitely suspended the operations of US social media giant Twitter. Nigeria's Information Minister Lai Mohammed says that the reason for the suspension is the persistent use of the platform for activities that may undermine Nigeria's corporate existence. Twitter removed on Wednesday a post by Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari threatening to punish regional secessionists blamed for attacks on government buildings. The social media firm said Buhari's tweet referring to the 1967-1970 civil war in the southeastern Biafra region violated its abusive behavior policy, leading to a 12-hour suspension of his account. Buhari tweeted on Tuesday that many people misbehaving today are too young to remember the deaths and destruction from the civil war. Nigeria has seen a spate of arson attacks on electoral offices and police stations in recent weeks, especially in the southeast. Well, joining us via Zoom to talk a little bit more on this story is the founder of Coding Mamas and social media analyst Nalisa Ngolana. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me.
All right, so what is this ado about Buhari's tweet? Explain to us what policy that he broke.
So, I mean, we've seen this before with President Trump, where tweets or posts on the platform that seem to abuse the policy around the use of abusive language. Obviously, President Buhari, in that tweet, he alluded to the fact that they would respond with violence to the violence that was currently happening in the country at the moment.
I suppose a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is a head of state, because if you look at Twitter, every single day there's abusive behavior and language.
Absolutely. And it's also because, yes, he is a head of state and the influence that he has. And also the fact that after he posted that tweet, there was a bit of violence that resulted out of it. So obviously, his influence is undeniable in the country.
So what's been his response to him having his account suspended?
So his response actually came through the Minister of Information, whose response has really just been that they will suspend the social media platform until further notice. There are reports that President Buhari himself, his response was that he was a little bit shocked by the fact that the social media platform would do that.
Sadly, this is something we've seen across the continent, that, a head of state is not happy with Twitter and will tell mobile operators to shut it down. We saw it in Uganda just during the elections there. We've seen it in other countries on the continent. And it's sad to see that Nigeria is following the same route.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, many of these authoritarian governments in the continent are using these bans and obviously their power to control voices that seemingly are, dissenting or in opposition. So it seems like it's something that we will be seeing quite a lot of it. Because even in the Ugandan experience, what President Museveni said there was that his ban of the platform was related to them wanting to control misinformation, etc. But however, we know that that's obviously not the reason.
Nigeria is the most populous country on the continent, so I would imagine that there's a huge number of Twitter users who are probably going to be pretty upset that they can't access the platform.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think since the NSARS campaign showed, especially in Nigeria, the huge role that social media can play in pushing for human rights and better governance, this is obviously something that a government as conservative as the Nigerian one wants to keep a hold on, especially because they know that young people are the majority that are active on the platform. So it seems switching off social media seems to be the easiest way to control people's voices.
Does President Buhari tweet himself? Do we know? I mean, sometimes they've got assistants and people who do the work for him. Was it his own
It's very
tweet?
unlikely that he's tweeting himself. It's very unlikely.
So why be outrageous? I suppose it's just the idea that somebody would dare delete a tweet of his.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's the fact that I think many of the African presidents, as where we've seen the ban of social media platforms, they are seeing it as arrogance on the part of the telcos company. They're seeing it as a way of these telco companies imposing their policies on our countries instead of understanding the policies for what they are.
So how do you ban Twitter? How does it work? You know, I mean, I see it as an app on my phone. What's the technicalities that must be followed? Do they tell the telcos?
So obviously they need to, yes, they need to get the telco companies to disable it.
And so I will wait.
Obviously what follows there is the literal switching off of the internet.
I mean, they'll use the other social media to complain, I guess. I mean, I'm told that 50...
We will find a way. I mean, already people on the ground are finding other ways of getting information out. You know, there are still other platforms such as, you know, the WhatsApps, the Facebooks. It will be hard to keep people down. People will always find a way.
And VPN is a vehicle that people use as well, isn't it? So that
yes.
So really, at the end of the day, he's actually making a problem worse by trying to curtail this freedom of the use of social media.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's also an opportunity for these social media companies to start paying attention to this trend that's happening in the continent around, you know, these bans and the shutdowns, because you also find that in some of these countries where you have these bans, what usually follows soon after that is there's a tax imposition on users. In the long run, this could obviously affect their numbers in the continent.
Is this something that's been kicked off because of Donald Trump, or there have been other leaders before that have been tracked by social media? Because it did take a while before they dealt with Donald Trump.
So I think before there has been, but I think with Donald Trump, it was the loudest. You know, we've seen with, you know, there was a Russia-France campaign that was supposedly trying to influence the Central African Republic. That was also flagged by Facebook, but that was not a president who was necessarily running that, but the accounts that were pushing that narrative were linked to those governments. So it's not the first time, but I mean, as we know, we experienced with Donald Trump, he never retreated silently anywhere. So his was allowed because of who he is.
I suppose questions will be raised about, you know, you delete a certain person's tweets, but there are more offensive ones that are making the rounds, and people with huge followings actually also abusing the platform, but they don't get banned somehow.
So I think it also depends. I mean, all the platforms have different ways that they moderate content based on obviously the criteria that they've set. There are very regular suspensions on Twitter of big accounts. So often, obviously, many of those don't necessarily make the headlines, but it is a well-established practice on these social media platforms.
So what do we learn as mere mortals here about what we can and cannot post on social media? Is there a guideline that I can see on the Twitter platform so that I don't get my account blocked?
So, I mean, on Twitter, it's very easy to have a look at what their policies are around, safety on the platform. On their help page, you can literally ask any question around engagement, around, what constitutes suspension and all of that. And usually they will warn you before they do that. So it does not, sometimes it's not a matter of just a tweet disappearing or they delete it. You will get that warning around your behavior, around the language that you are using.
I suppose they rely a lot on people reporting posts and tweets.
Yes.
And then they investigate, and then upon that, because I can't think there's somebody who sits and tracks the president of Nigeria and 53 other countries on the continent.
But I mean, there are lots of tools that they obviously have. They actually have teams dedicated to this kind of work. So presidents would be high on the list, obviously, of accounts that are being watched, especially because in a country like Nigeria, there've been issues before, like around, when there was the issue with Bobby Wine, when there was the End SARS campaign as well. So obviously they should have certain accounts on high alert, and we do have lots of teams and the technology to be able to keep an eye on these red flags.
Have we seen profile accounts being blocked, closed, deleted in South Africa?
Yes, we have. It's actually, like I was saying earlier, it's a very it's quite a regular occurrence in the South African environment, where you'll find somebody starting a new account because their account was either hacked, or their account was suspended by Twitter due to activity that flouts the platform's policies. So it happens quite regularly. People are aware, and generally people try to stick to the rules when it comes to engagement.
All right, perhaps we can close where we started. So President Buhari's account, I mean, he got one tweet deleted. Is that a good thing, that it gives out a kind of message that no matter who you are, you must behave?
It is a good thing on one hand, but on the other, the subject of content moderation is something that we should possibly be talking to quite a bit, in terms of, what is the criteria and how much power are we giving social media platforms to decide our level of engagement and the way in which we engage on these platforms.
All right, Nalisa, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for your insights on this social media world that sometimes can be quite a thing to unpack. Thank you so much indeed for your insights tonight.